Today, we're going to be examining the geography of the Fertile Crescent. Now, the Fertile Crescent is an area in Southwest Asia that extends from the Mediterranean Sea in the northwest to the Persian Gulf in the southeast. Now, rivers support the growth of these civilizations that we discussed in our prior video. Ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and China. Now, again, rivers support these growth of the civilizations. People settled where crops would grow. Crops grew well near rivers because flooding provided the silt, which is the rich soil. Again, the Fertile Crescent is shaped like a crescent, and it is between the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Persian Gulf. It is located in Southwest Asia. Now let's look at a region that is inside the Fertile Crescent, and it is called Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is the land between the rivers, and the two rivers they're referring to are the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Yearly flooding provided silt, and the flooding came from the snow melting on the mountaintops and then running down the mountains into the rivers, and then they would flood, providing this rich soil. It was ideal for farming, and these hunters and gatherers that we discussed earlier decided to set up permanent settlements because it met their basic needs. They learned how to control the floods and planted their crops and grew foods. Early villages developed into civilizations. The next thing, we'll look at the farming and the cities of this civilization. The challenge was how to control the flooding. Well, they used irrigation to do this. In irrigation, during this process, they dug out large storage bins to hold the water. They dug canals that connected these basins to a network of ditches. These ditches brought the water from the fields and watered grazing areas for cattle and sheep. Irrigation made farmers more productive. It even produced a surplus of crops, which allowed for these people to have a division of labor. They all didn't have to be farmers. They could have other jobs. And the new jobs might be a craftsman, a priest, or a government worker. Mesopotamian settlements grew in size then because they were very popular because, again, they were meeting all the needs of the people. These cities developed and trading grew in these cities, and cities became the political, religious, cultural, and economic centers of the civilization. Now, we know that the Fertile Crescent, again, is from the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf, and then the rivers that run in that Fertile Crescent, the Tigris and Euphrates, between that is Mesopotamia. Now, in the southeastern portion of Mesopotamia, you will find a city called Sumer. And so we are now going to talk about the rise of Sumer. It was an advanced society. Sumer created this complex society. Most people lived in rural areas, which is like the country, but they were governed by the urban areas, which is like the city. The size of the countryside is controlled by each city-state depended on their military strength. Now, Sargon, in 2300 BC, was the leader of the Akkadians, and the Akkadians lived in north of Sumer. He built a large army and defeated all the city-states of Sumer and northern Mesopotamia. With all these conquests, he established the world's first empire. So he is governing a lot of land, or in control of a lot of land. This empire went from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. So that was a large empire. Akkadian Empire lasted for 150 years. Now again, we talked about the Sumerians were an advanced society. Some of their achievements, one was cuneiform, and it was the world's first written language. This is where they took sharp reeds to make wedge-shaped symbols on clay tablets, and they called these reeds, when they formed them, stylus. They used cuneiform to keep records for their business, government, and their temples. Simple pictographs evolved into complex symbols. Also, many people wanted to be a scribe, and a scribe was the writer who wrote on these clay tablets, and this was a way in the social hierarchy for people to move up in rank. They also, one of their achievements were where they wrote stories or long poems about heroes, and this is called an epic. Now, some of their advances and inventions were wheeled carts and wagons, the potter's wheel, which they were able to make vases and pottery items, an ox-drawn plow. They built sewers under streets, used bronze to make tools. They also invented a clock and calendar, and of course their architecture was very impressive with their ziggurats, which were their temples. And the last two things we'll look at was how religion shaped this society. Religion, again, was an important role in all aspects of their life, because remember, they felt that everything that happened was related to the gods. So if they had a bad harvest, it was because the gods were mad. If they had a good harvest, then they were pleasing the gods. They practiced polytheism, which is the belief in many gods. And they believed, again, that these gods had enormous power. They believed their success depending on pleasing the gods, and they chose one god to be a protector of their city-state. Priests helped them to gain the gods' favor. Again, in the social hierarchy, we talked about the social ladder of the society. You had the kings at the top. Next, you had the priests and the nobles. The middle were the skilled craftsmen and merchants. Then the working class, farmers and laborers, and slaves were at the bottom. And even some upper class women were educated and learned, had a place in society.